We know that elastic IP addresses in Amazon Web Services are their own resource that we can associate with network interfaces or with instances so that they have a public IP, which means that they are publicly accessible over the internet. Now, an elastic IP also means not only it's publicly accessible, but that IP address will not change. It's a static, unchanging public IP address. Unlike when you have auto public IP address assignment enabled at the subnet level. That assigned public IP for an instance normally changes every time you stop and restart the instance, but not with an elastic IP. So here we're going to work with elastic IP addressing using the CLI. And here in the console, I'm going to get to the CLI through Cloud Shell. Okay, so here in the CLI, I'm going to start with AWS EC2 help. Let's see what the next level command set would be. Well, immediately one pops out in the A's. It is allocate dash address. I'm going to press Q. Let's see what we can find out about that. AWS EC2 allocate dash address help. Aha, allocates an elastic IP address to your Amazon Web Services account. That's exactly what I want to do. Of course, after that's done, it tells me that I can associate it with an instance or a network interface. Yeah, that's right. Standard elastic IP stuff. Q for quit. Now we know enough to move forward. So AWS EC2 allocate dash address. That's all I'm going to do. And it returns the public IP address here that starts with 35.168. It's coming from Amazon's public IP address pool. And the network border group region is set to US East 1, which is, of course, where I am currently working here in the console. If I were to go to the EC2 management console, and in the left-hand navigator, scroll down under Network and Security to Elastic IPs, this is where it would show up. There it is. It's 35.168, where if we go back into the Cloud Shell and run AWS EC2 describe dash addresses, it returns our elastic IPs, and the one we just created is the only one associated with our AWS account. There it is, 35.168 and whatnot. But that's not enough, because what we want to do is make sure it gets used. Maybe what I'll do is actually give it a name. Let's tag it. AWS EC2 create dash tags dash resources. And this is where I'll take the allocation ID, copy it, and I'll paste it for use in my command line. And then dash tags, key equals name, comma, value equals, why don't we call this EIP1, Elastic IP Address 1. Okay. So now when I run AWS EC2 describe dash addresses once again, it's now showing my tag information, which can be very helpful if you're working with a lot of these static, unchanging elastic IP addresses. But we've still not associated it. Well, here in another web browser window, if I go to the EC2 Management Console and go to the Instances view, this is where I can select an instance and copy the instance ID. I need that instance ID to work with it at the command line. So back here in Cloud Shell, what I would like to do is run AWS EC2 associate dash address dash instance dash ID, and I'll paste in what I've just copied for the instance that I want to associate this elastic IP with. Then I'll specify dash allocation dash ID, and I can also get that, well, either from the command line as we saw previously, or also in the console, sort of the elastic IPs, and I can copy the allocation ID from here. And I will press enter. Okay, so then that returns an association ID. Now you will recall that if we describe our addresses again, that this elastic IP begins with 35.168. Well, let's see if that's now tied to our EC2 instance. So here in the instances view, I'll click to open up the details of that instance, and sure enough, its public IPv4 address is showing as 35.168, in this case, .201.6, and the name of it, as per our tagging, shows up in parentheses as EIP1. Now that's great, but let's test it. Let's make sure that if we stop this instance and start it up again, it still has the EIP1 same public IP address beginning with 35.168. Okay, so from the instance state menu, stop instance, stop. We'll just kind of keep our eye on that with the refresh button here in our instances view. And currently the state is that it is stopping. Okay, so our instance is running. It's still initializing, but if I select it to open up its details, it's still using the same public IPv4 address because we associated the EIP with it. Still starts with 35.168.